Awesome. Good evening. My name is Jasmine Flores. I'm one of the chapter consultants for Delta Sigma Pi, and thank you both for being here for setting yourself up for CMP success. At any time, like I said, feel free to add questions, additional comments if you want a little bit more emphasis on anything through the chat. So could get started. Next slide. All right, first, let's acquaint ourselves with CMP. What is CMP and what is the chapter management program? So it is a three-tier program that creates operational expectations that we have for all of our chapters. It has specific requirements, deadlines, just simple expectations for the basic operational things that you do day in and day out in your chapter. All of our chapters are required to be an accredited chapter at the end of each academic year. We do go into the additional second and third tier. So with chapter recognition, it does involve and focuses a little bit more on your alumni. And then tier 3, chapter of excellence, does focus on the engagement of the general community or the campus as a whole. So when you're thinking about, oh, what item is under specific tiers, these are things that you're probably already doing, but focusing on accredited chapter is very important, and then looking at the additional requirements, which we will be looking on the next slide. I always go on the hub. This is a great place to see where you're at within CMP for the current year. When you first log on to the hub, you always land on the calendar. This is where you see any events that have been added to your calendar. We'll go a little bit more in depth in that a little bit on. On the left-hand side, you see all the tabs that will provide you all the information from viewing your status report, from seeing your member roster, your officer roster. The dashboard includes a lot of important information, such as your pledge education program dates, your term start dates that then reflect deadlines on CMP. It's not included in the screenshot, but right under one of the last ones is a supplies ordering tab, which this is where the chapter officers that is responsible for ordering badges, crown and deltas, order those materials to then reflect the chapter's inventory. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you do see the chapter management program screenshot taken from the website. Anyone does have access to this form, so it's not just the officers that have access to the hub, but any brother of the chapter, your chapter advisor, student activities officials, your dean is able to view the status of the chapter currently and then review previous years going back to 2012, and then including multi-year report. If you want to see the regional reports, there's a provincial one, and then there's a national report that pulls up every single chapter's progress within the chapter management program. I can go back. With the chapter management report in the multi-year report, I like pulling 2-3 years and comparing, all right, where are we at now and what have we missed in the past? We'll go a little bit into the next slide of what do the colors mean and what are some notes to take place, but I do see the chapter status report being a good opportunity of learning from past mistakes that your chapter has potentially made. All right, let's go into the colors. How to read the status report. You will see that in this first example, you see a lot of colors and there's respective items. Green, good. Green is good. That means an item has been received and approved. You see some orange, meaning the form is late. The deadline is reported on the specific form, but if an item is reported late, you do not have an option to get that green aspect. Sorry. The yellow, however, you still have an opportunity to gain the access of it turning green. So it just means the form has not been approved or it is still pending approval. We'll go into how to make the pending approval an approved item. And lastly, the red is past due. The red can become, of course, either yellow or orange, but we never want to see a lot of red. As you're going through the different statuses report, yes, you'll see under accredited chapter, all the colors. Then you'll go into the second and third tier and you'll ask, why aren't they in color? You'll see a lot of black and white because, as we'll go into the next slide in a little bit, you have to complete specific numbers of or specific items, but you don't have to complete all of them. So we don't want to confuse any of our officers for like, why are all of these reds when we only chose a couple of the options. When you're reading through the status reports, obviously your local leadership do have access to the status report within the hub, but they also have the access, as you're saying, the regional report, provincial, and the national. So they're able to look at what are the trends within the region, the province, and look at potential notes. On the very right-hand side, you do see notes for late items or not approved items of this form was denied due to X reason. I always recommend, especially as you're submitting your bylaws plus procedures, those specific items that might not be approved on the first submission, look at the comments. Those are located there. Your vice president, chapter operations, also has access, as your so does your president, of seeing all the forms on the hub. Another thing to note within this specific screenshot is the final deadline versus the suggested deadline of some of those are dependent on specific dates. Others are hard set deadlines, which if we have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And if anything looks incorrect, such as a prime example would be dues deadline. Dues are due within 30 days of the first day of class. If you see that that specific date is incorrect within your dashboard on the hub, send hub@dsp.org an email as soon as possible and we'll get that rectified. On to the next slide. All right, adding an event. To receive credit for events such as professional activities, community service, under here, there's a whole list of all the events that can be added to the hub. Your events must be added to the calendar prior to you being able to submit the report, submit the information, and receive credit. We sometimes get the question, we had a chapter meeting on X day. It's not located on our calendar. Why is the reason? The reason is the event wasn't added to the calendar. Whatever each officer submits to the calendar is then added and you could see it on there. It's up to each chapter's discretion of when they add it, when they submit their forms. However, we do recommend add all your events as soon as you can. If you know you have something penciled in, feel free to add it to your calendar so you can then have the calendar view of the month and see, all right, we have 2 professional events, a community service event, and we have all our chapter meetings listed on our calendar. You can easily take a screenshot of this and then share it with your chapter members. Now, when we say submit your forms as soon as possible, it is one of the biggest recommendations that we say, host your event. If it's a recruitment event, community service, and then submit the information. How many people showed up? What were the strengths of the event, the weaknesses? How can you improve upon it? All this information, one, will help your future officers when they're looking back and seeing, oh, our chapter held this event every single year, and this is how they improved on it every single year. But at the end of the academic year, when your vice president scholarship and awards is applying for chapter awards, they're able to add that information to the application process. Again, your chapter president and your vice president chapter operations has access to review and submit every single form under chapter management program. However, it is not either person's job to do so. Everything should be delegated to the prospective officer because each prospective officer has access to submit their events. Your vice president community service does not have access to submit any professional events and vice versa. But this is also an opportunity for them, for all your officers to work with one another of how can we fulfill our duties as easy as possible as, not that many events so that your members have quality events, but also enough events that they're getting to be around one another. All right, we'll go into the CMP guide to go in a little bit more depth of some tips and tricks. How to use the CMP guide. The CMP guide is one of my favorite resources that I use every single day. I have it pulled up right now. If you haven't done so, as Vice President Chapter Operation, primarily recommend download it. We do try to update it at least once a year. We're looking at potential updates or adding, clarifying information, but the CMP guide is a great resource that breaks down all the requirements of each tier in different aspects. We have pages just a page on all the requirements of the accredited chapter, requirements of chapter of recognition, chapter of excellence. We have it broken down by specific events that includes the description, who should be submitting, when should they be submitting, and how to submit, as shown in this screenshot. Like I said, I go back and if I have specific questions, like this is where I see. If it's a specific presentation, it even adds a link to the presentation on our website. So just a general great resource that you can share with all of your officers. On this screenshot, it breaks it down of duties of each officer. So on here, you see the president. If you do go onto the CMP guide, you see there's not much under the vice president chapter operations. There's a reason for that, because they should be delegating the duties and everything. They do have the strategic plans, but besides that, everything else, everyone else should be doing. And the real cool thing about the CMP guide is that you could always Control F and find any keyword that you're looking for. If you're looking for further instructions on the initiation ritual memorization requirements, you could Control F and find that in 2 seconds. Next slide. All right, let's go into a little bit more of the accredited chapter, which I said previously is a baseline requirement that we have for all of our chapters. We expect all of our chapters to complete 100% of the items listed within that tier with at least 95% approval. We do allow a little bit of that leeway, getting 2 items either not approved or late. Now, once a chapter hits that 3rd item, the chapter is no longer eligible to be an accredited chapter for the academic year. Now, we still want our chapters to complete as many of these forms as meeting deadlines. We'll go a little bit more into what necessarily falls under that, because there's a reason behind everything, right? There's reasons why you should be submitting your pledging ceremony on time, your initiation report on time. So 1, your recruits that become pledges gain access to their pledge modules on time. Initiation fees, being paid on time, so the chapter does not receive any late fees, and so on. All right. Some of the items that are under accredited chapter are general chapter management. It is September, so a lot of our chapters are starting classes. If you haven't submitted your officer report, highly recommend doing that. So tip number 1, if your chapter has recruits, feel free to add them now, give them a little bit more time so they have a little bit more time prior to your pledging ceremony to complete their profile and become a recruit in good standing so that you're able to report them. No recruit should be allowed into the pledging ceremony if they have not completed their profile. You do have access to resend these links. And if you have any questions at any time, send hub@dsp.org a quick email and we could help you with whatever questions that you have. Other additional items under credit chapter include financial dues, fees, professional and service activities. You have your events. And then lastly, national involvement and fraternity support, including Lead School, which is coming up. So haven't signed up, please discuss that as a chapter. Lead Provincial, which are in the spring, Presence Academy, and then Grand Chapter Congress, which already occurred this last August. All right, next item. Now going up.
Bear with me, I'm having technical difficulties. It's not loading.
We'll see about that.
Well, we could go straight into chapter of recognition, which I said is a little bit more involving and engaging your alumni members. Yeah, thank you. Cool. With chapter recognition, it is required to complete the 6 items listed on here. Some of them are, you get automatic credit for it, such as not having 60-day debt, that if you complete that, which means you don't have any 60-day debt, you receive the credit for that. Additional ones, participation in National Service Project. That includes Make a Difference Day, which is in October. Add that to your calendar, or participating in any, like I said, national initiative projects such as the Ronald McDonald House. So if you participated at Grand Chapter Congress in the service activity, you are able to submit a community service event with that additional credit. Membership status report, I will say under chapter recognition, it is one of the mostly missed items. So be on the lookout and submit that update prior to the deadline in December. In addition, the diversity assessment is also due in December. If you have any questions on that pretty new item, send us an email. We're happy to assist your chapter and giving you next steps. Awesome. And then with chapter of excellence, you do have to complete, again, the 5 required items listed on here, and then you do get to choose 6 of the 11 optional items. Highly recommend looking at this and asking your executive committee, all right, what are some of the things that we're already doing that we didn't even know how to CMP, form, or something that we can receive easy credit for. And on here, under the optional items, like I said, submitting chapter executive committee meeting minutes. Your vice president chapter operation is most likely already taking meeting minutes and has those on deck to be submitted. So all you have to do is add the date to the calendar and you submit the document and they get sent to your district director. Other items which you probably do, an alumni newsletter, year in review, those are pretty easy things that don't require as much, back and forth between different officers planning an event. So like I said, those are things that you're able to, going back to our status report, go back and see if this has been done in the past. And if it hasn't, make that a priority of, hey, we do this already, let's submit it. Awesome. Next slide. So as you are submitting your CMP items, you will see that they are recorded in multiple ways. Some are automatic approval. When you submit your officer report, you verify that everybody's information is accurate, you receive that credit. So there's no pending item. There is no somebody needs to approve it. But like I said, other items are reviewed and approved by your chapter president, which then goes to your local volunteers that also need to do the additional review. Some items require specific verification. Your initiation ritual memorization, pledging ceremony ritual memorization, or just your general events that require a little bit more review from central office staff of, we held this professional event where this alumni speaker also presented. So get two CMP items for that one event. Going back to some that may say not approved or pending approval, that do take a little bit more time, would be your bylaws, policies, procedures, pledge education program, that do take some time. And when all 200 plus chapters submit at the same time, it does require a little bit more time for staff to either delegate it to other volunteers or just review and get multiple aspects of levels of approval. Other things with submitting your CMP items, you will see, you will utilize these four forms within the hub: the calendar of submitting your events, the forms where you're able to update alumni contact information, where you're able to submit your alumni newsletter, where you're able to, each officer is able to see what they need to submit. Under the members tab, you will utilize this a lot when you're submitting your pledge report, initiation report, when you're reporting members as graduated or studied abroad, and you get that, membership status report, CMP item checked off. And then dashboard. On your dashboard, you click on the finance section and you're able to pay your invoices. Your vice president of finance will most likely use that dashboard link all the time. Awesome. Close to a couple last final thoughts. Again, I will reiterate this and I will say it all the time. Although your president and vice president chapter operations have access to submit all the CMP requirements, it is not their responsibility. It's their responsibility to ensure that the other officers are completing not only their events, but they're also getting good records and receiving the credit for their hard work. And at the end of the year, it's now saying our chapter completed X, Y, and Z, and now we're a chapter recognition, chapter of excellence. The breakdown is taken specifically from the CMP guide. If you're able to share this at your next executive committee, I highly recommend doing so. If you want to discuss how can we effectively strategically plan of how can we work with one another to get multiple credits, sponsoring, co-sponsoring a campus event that is also a professional event. That could be an idea that you take to your chapter. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be under one officer. It could be additional brothers of the chapter that are a part of other organizations that they want to collaborate, and you're probably already doing these kind of things. So these officer responsibilities can be found on the CMP guide, which I will link to the chat in a little bit. But one last slide. Resources. The Collegiate Chapter Vice President of Chapter Operations has so many resources on our website. If you look up general resources, officers, and click on BPCO, you will find the officer training module, the officer packet. You will get access to the hub, as all the officers do, and CMP. Lastly, we are here as a resource as well. I could talk about CMP for a long time. And like I said, we will go specifically into some quick Q&A if anybody has any questions of everything I have just gone over.